They say blood is thicker than water, but in my case, it just meant the blade cut deeper. Growing up in a small Kentucky town, there wasn't much to distract folks from gossip or judgment, and my older brother Derek was the hometown hero they all loved to brag about. Straight A's, varsity quarterback, ROTC golden boy. If there was a banner to hang a name on, it had his. Then there was me, Noah Mercer, the other brother, the quiet one who couldn't throw a spiral or nail a perfect push-up. I was the kid who fixed old radios in the garage, who got anxious when people shouted, and who somehow never measured up, especially not to Derek. He made sure of that. At home, his teasing started off as jokes. "Hey, Ma, did you know Noah's gonna be the first guy to get a Purple Heart from tripping over his own shoelaces?" At school, it turned to public ridicule. My brother thinks he's joining the army. What's he gonna do? Fold laundry in the barracks? And the worst part? Everyone laughed with him, even my dad. But deep inside, I knew something they didn't. I wasn't weak. I just hadn't found my battlefield yet. The day I signed up. The day I walked into the local Army recruitment center, Derek actually drove me there. "You sure about this, Squirt?" he asked, smirking behind the wheel of his prized Mustang. "You know boot camp doesn't have nap breaks and comic books, right?" I didn't rise to the bait. I just looked him in the eye and said, "I'm not trying to be you. I'm trying to be better." He snorted, shook his head, and waited in the car while I signed the papers that would change everything. Boot camp, where boys are broken or built. Fort Jackson was a slap in the face and a punch in the gut. The first week, I almost quit. The drill sergeant had a voice like a jackhammer and the patience of a grenade. My arms gave out on push-ups. My legs screamed through every mile. And every time I wanted to give up, I heard Derek's voice in my head, laughing, doubting, calling me soft. So I stopped running from the pain and started using it. Week after week, I hardened. I got faster, sharper. I wasn't the strongest recruit, but I outworked every one of them. And one cold, gray morning during a 12-mile ruck march, I helped carry a heat-exhausted buddy 3 miles to the finish. I wasn't looking to be a hero, but that's when something clicked. Maybe I wasn't built like Derek, but I was built for this. Deployment. The desert doesn't care who you were. I got deployed to Iraq in 2005, stationed near Fallujah. Over there, the sand didn't care if you were varsity or not. It didn't care if your brother was the golden boy back home. It only cared if you watched your sector, covered your team, and made it back. My role started in logistics, but I volunteered for every convoy that needed extra eyes. It was risky, but I couldn't stomach the idea of sitting safe while others took fire. That's how I earned my first commendation. A roadside bomb hit us outside Al-Karma. I dragged a wounded corporal out of the wreckage while taking shrapnel to my left leg. I didn't even realize I was bleeding until we got back to base. They said I saved his life. I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt solid. Like I was finally becoming the man I was meant to be. The letter that cut deeper than the bomb. A few months later, while I was recovering, I got a letter from home. It wasn't from my parents. It was from Derek. "Heard you played soldier. You can stop pretending now, Noah. Don't let them give you any medals for doing your job. Real men don't chase praise. No, hope you're okay. No, we're proud. Just venom." I remember sitting on my bunk, gripping that letter, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. I stared at the ink until it blurred from the tears I refused to let fall. That was the day I stopped fighting for their approval and started fighting for mine. Fast forward. The promotion that changed everything. By 2010, I was a staff sergeant with a team of my own. My work in the field earned me transfer orders, back to the States, to Fort Carson in Colorado. Guess who was stationed there? That's right, Derek. He was now a second lieutenant, fresh out of OCS, assigned to a different division. Word was he still walked like he owned the place. Still sharp jaw, still barking orders like a drill sergeant on a caffeine high. But this time, I wasn't the boy from Kentucky. I was a soldier who'd seen the inside of real war zones. I had stripes, scars, and stories that weren't for show. And I was about to walk into his world again, not as the little brother, but as someone he couldn't ignore. Returning stateside was surreal. I had spent 5 years in the sandbox, where decisions were split second, and the air smelled like heat, sweat, and diesel fuel. Now I was back on a base where the grass got mowed, and the worst complaint was someone stealing MRE crackers. Fort Carson looked like a postcard compared to Iraq. But something told me the real battle was about to begin. Because Derek was there, and I knew he still thought of me as the boy who couldn't throw a football straight, walking tall in the same place. The first time I saw him again, it was during a base-wide inspection. I was assigned to the logistics division, leading a tight-knit squad who respected me not for what I said, but what I'd done. These were men who'd seen action. Some had followed me through convoy runs. They didn't salute my rank. They respected my grit. We were standing in formation when I saw him, Derek, marching stiffly behind his commander, clipboard in hand. He hadn't changed a bit, still had that smug jawline, still walked like he was auditioning for a recruitment poster. But this time, I wasn't intimidated. This time I wasn't the joke. He locked eyes with me from across the formation, and for the first time in my life, I saw something unfamiliar on his face. Hesitation. The moment. Everything changed. The commander, Colonel Rickman, made his way down the line. He stopped in front of me. "Staff Sergeant Mercer?" "Yes, sir." His eyes flicked to my ribbons, then back to my face. "You're the one from Al-Karma convoy team. Dragged Corporal Singh through a hot zone. Is that right?" "Yes, sir." He extended his hand. "Welcome to Fort Carson. I read your file. Impressive work. We could use more NCOs like you." I shook his hand, trying to keep my voice steady. "Thank you, sir." And then it happened. Right there, in front of my brother and half the base, Colonel Rickman saluted me. A full, deliberate salute. Not because I outranked him, not because of protocol, but because he respected me. Behind him, Derek stiffened. His eyes widened. He didn't move, didn't blink. Just stood there, clipboard dropping slightly like someone had cut the strings. No applause, no words, just silence. When the inspection ended, Derek caught up to me behind one of the storage buildings. He looked like someone had hit him in the chest with a cinder block. He saluted you?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I guess he reads files, not yearbooks." He looked at me like he didn't recognize the man in front of him. "I didn't think you were like that out there." I shrugged. "You never asked." He opened his mouth to say something else, but nothing came out, and for once, he walked away without a single insult. The new reputation. Things shifted after that. Word got around that I wasn't just some logistics guy. I was someone who'd earned his place through blood, sweat, and bone-deep loyalty. You see, in the Army, reputation travels faster than paperwork. People started asking me to speak at training sessions. Young recruits wanted to hear my stories. And more than once, I caught officers giving me nods that said, "You've done what we've only read about." I never asked for attention, but after a lifetime of being in someone else's shadow, it felt damn good to finally cast one of my own. A question he didn't expect. One evening, during a quiet moment at the rec center, Derek approached me again. This time he wasn't smug. He looked tired. "I've been thinking," he said. "I always saw myself as the leader in the family, the one who'd make something of himself." I didn't say anything. I just let him speak. "But now, it's like you're the one everyone looks up to. Even me." That hit harder than anything he'd ever thrown at me before. So I asked him, "Derek, did you ever actually believe I wouldn't make it? Or did you just need me to fail so you could feel like you succeeded?" He didn't answer, because the truth was obvious. The promotion that cemented it all. A few months later, I got promoted to Sergeant First Class. I was offered a leadership role in the tactical training unit. Me, the brother who was once laughed at for even joining up. They asked me to lead a training session on leadership under pressure. Guess who was assigned as one of the attendees? Yup. Lieutenant Derek Mercer. I'll never forget the moment he walked into that briefing room and saw me at the podium. He didn't laugh. He didn't smirk. He stood at attention. And when I opened with, "Today's training is led by someone you all know used to be overlooked," he dropped his gaze. By the time I started leading training at Fort Carson, I had made peace with the fact that Derek might never say the words I wanted to hear. "Sorry. I was wrong. You earned it." Those 3 phrases were rarer than rainfall in July at Fort Irwin, but I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I had stripes, I had scars, and I had the respect of soldiers who knew what real leadership looked like. Still, deep down, I wondered if he'd ever stop seeing me as little Noah. The emergency that changed everything. It was late, about 2200 hours, when the call came in. A Humvee had rolled off the edge of a trail during a night training exercise up near the Pike National Forest terrain range. The vehicle was teetering on a slope, 2 soldiers trapped inside. One had a broken femur, the other possibly concussed. The rescue team on duty was delayed due to a separate fire drill on the north end of base. We needed to move fast. I was off duty but nearby. When the call hit comms, I grabbed my gear and radioed command. I didn't ask permission. I gave notice. "This is SFC Mercer. I'm 5 minutes out. Rolling now." And guess who was already there? When I arrived on site, headlamps lit up the trail and the wind cut sharp through the trees. And there he was. Lieutenant Derek Mercer, standing frozen near the Humvee, radio to his ear, visibly shaken. He saw me jog up and didn't even blink. "Noah, thank God. The vehicle's slipping. One of the rear tires is barely holding on the edge. I don't..." His voice cracked. "I don't know what to do next." I didn't gloat. I didn't remind him of every insult from high school. I just knelt down, scanned the situation, and said, "All right. We're doing this my way." And for the first time, he didn't argue, taking command, without taking credit. I radioed in for a winch and tactical support, then directed 2 junior soldiers to secure the slope with anchor cables. While Derek paced nervously near the edge, I crawled under the vehicle to talk to the guys trapped inside. "Hang tight. We're pulling you out one at a time. You're not alone out here." The rescue took 42 minutes, but when it was done, when both soldiers were loaded into medevac and the Humvee was stabilized, Derek looked at me like he had just seen someone he'd never met before. "You kept your cool," he said. I froze. I nodded. Everyone freezes once, but not everyone shows up anyway. The ride back. Driving back to base in silence, Derek finally broke it. "You remember when we were kids," he said, "and I used to tell people you couldn't even tie your boots right?" I smirked. "You said a lot worse than that." "Yeah," he admitted. "I think I was just scared you'd turn out better than me." That hung in the air like the smell of motor oil, thick, honest, hard to ignore. He continued, "You didn't just prove me wrong. You made me respect you. And that's harder than being right." A letter I never expected. A few days later, I found a folded sheet tucked into my gear locker. It was handwritten, neat, definitely not mine. "Noah, I owe you more than I can say. Not just for the rescue, but for becoming the kind of man I used to pretend I was. If I ever have a son, I hope he turns out like you. Derek." That letter meant more than any medal I'd ever earned, because it wasn't just an apology. It was a salute from the one person who'd spent a lifetime withholding it. The unexpected phone call. A month later, Derek got orders to transfer to a new unit in Virginia. We shook hands before he left, and for the first time, he pulled me into a hug. No jokes, no digs. 2 weeks after he left, I got a call from his new commander. "Sergeant Mercer, I just wanted to say, your brother speaks about you with deep respect. Said you saved 2 lives and taught him how to lead under pressure. He said if I had half your instincts, I'd be twice the officer." I didn't know what to say. For so long, I'd been the shadow, the background, the other Mercer. Now, I was the standard. If you had told me when I was 17 that I'd one day be standing on a stage in front of generals, veterans, and government officials, all while my brother sat in the front row clapping for me, I'd have laughed so hard I'd choke on my mom's meatloaf. But life's funny like that, because 5 months after the rescue at Pike Trail, I got invited to speak at the National Leadership Development Forum in D.C., a place where they usually let colonels, commanders, and defense contractors do the talking. And me? I was just a sergeant first class with a crooked smile and a box of medals that collected more dust than admiration. You're the kind of leader we want them to hear from. I almost turned down the invitation. Public speaking wasn't exactly in my skill set. My leadership was always boots on the ground, not behind a microphone. But my CO pulled me aside and said, "Mercer, they've heard enough from officers who've never been outside the wire. They need to hear from someone who's led in the mud, the blood, and the moments where the manual doesn't apply." That hit home. So I ironed my dress uniform, practiced my speech in front of the mirror about 50 times, and boarded a flight to D.C. What I didn't know, what no one told me, was that someone had pulled strings to make sure one seat in the front row stayed open. For Derek, the man in the front row. The ballroom was full of suits and stars. There were generals with silver hair, senators in crisp ties, and consultants who had probably never set foot outside an air-conditioned office. But me? I spoke plain. I talked about what leadership really looks like when a convoy hits an IED and the radio goes dead. I talked about calming a 20-year-old kid who just watched his best friend lose a leg. I talked about how sometimes leadership isn't shouting orders. It's kneeling beside someone and saying, "We'll get through this, together." I didn't use buzzwords or PowerPoints. I used my story. And when I finished, the room stood. But only one person had tears in his eyes. My brother. The moment I'll never forget. Afterward, Derek came up and hugged me again, harder than before. "You nailed it," he said. "You didn't just represent the Army. You represented us, every soldier who was ever overlooked or underestimated. I looked him in the eye and said, "Funny. That's what I used to be to you." He nodded. "I know. I was wrong. But watching you up there, you're not just my brother. You're the leader I wish I could have been." That was the closest I'd ever seen him come to crying, and I didn't rub it in. I just said, "You've got time." Because redemption's not just about proving people wrong. It's about giving them the chance to grow too, going public and staying humble. The video of my speech hit YouTube a few days later. Didn't take long to blow up. Thousands of comments. Veterans saying they finally felt seen. Young recruits saying they wanted to serve for leaders like that. Even a few military influencers reached out and asked if I'd consider writing a book. But I didn't care about going viral. What mattered was what happened the next weekend. I went home. To Kentucky. Back to where it all started. I hadn't been back to our hometown in years. Too many ghosts. Too many memories of being less than. But this time was different. This time I wasn't walking in with my head down. I wasn't the other brother. I was just me. Derek and I visited Mom's old house. She wasn't around anymore. Cancer had taken her the year I deployed. But we stood on that porch where he used to crack jokes at my expense, and he looked out at the lawn and said, "I can still hear myself being an ass out here." I chuckled. So can I. Then he handed me a box. Inside was his first Army Commendation Medal. He said, "This isn't for me. It's a reminder for you to never let anyone tell you you're small again." Life has a strange way of circling back. After the speech, after the hug, after the medals and honors, I thought maybe we'd finally turn the page, that the past was buried. But life doesn't work like that. Because 3 months later, my father passed away. Heart failure. Quiet, peaceful. He just didn't wake up one morning. The man who once laughed at the idea of me becoming a soldier. The same man who said, "You're no Derek," over Sunday dinner more times than I could count, was gone. And suddenly, all the things I'd thought I made peace with came back like a steel boot to the gut. Back to the old church. The funeral was held at our childhood church. Same wooden pews, same cracked stained glass window over the altar, same pulpit where I gave a nervous speech for Boy Scouts in 7th grade, while Dad scolded me afterward for stuttering. I hadn't stepped foot in that building in nearly 2 decades. Walking down that aisle in my dress uniform felt like entering a battlefield of memories. I spotted old neighbors, a few retired teachers, even Pastor Green, now white-haired and leaning heavy on a cane. And then I saw them, Dad's friends. The same men who used to say, "Derek's got the gift," while shaking their heads at me. They whispered when I walked by. One of them muttered, "Didn't know Noah stuck with the Army. Thought he'd wash out." That's when Derek stood up, loud enough to hush the room. "He didn't just stick with it," he said, turning to face them. "He's the only reason 2 soldiers came home alive last year. He's the one the generals quote, the one who taught me how to lead." He pointed to me. "That man there? That's a soldier's soldier." You could have heard a pin drop. The eulogy no one expected. When it came time to speak, the pastor asked if any family wanted to say something. Derek stepped aside. "This one's yours," he whispered. I stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd, most of whom had written me off by age 16. "I wasn't the son my father bragged about," I began. "And we had our differences. But there's one thing he gave me that I carry every day, and that's a spine." I paused. I learned how to take hits early, how to stay standing when no one claps. And I want to thank him for that. because those lessons saved lives. I stepped down. Didn't wait for applause. I wasn't there for their approval. After the service back at the reception, one of Dad's old war buddies came up. Vietnam vet, wore a faded cap with jump wings. He looked at me and said, "He talked about you more than you knew. He just didn't know how to say it." I nodded. "That's all right. I heard him loud and clear growing up." He smiled. "Nah, kid. I mean lately. When he saw your name on that news report, he cried. Said, 'That boy made it. Damn, he made it.'" I stood there in silence, holding a lukewarm cup of coffee, trying not to blink too fast. One final visit. Later that evening, Derek and I visited Dad's grave. The air was still. The sky was that hazy blue that comes before dusk settles in. I said nothing at first, just stood there, letting the wind carry what it would. Then Derek said, "He never knew how to love you right. But I did worse. I knew, and I still chose to mock you." I turned to him. "You're making it right now." He placed his hand on my shoulder. "You were always the stronger brother, Noah. I just didn't want to see it." I didn't reply, because I knew it. And now, finally, so did he. A quiet ride home. As we drove back, neither of us talked for a while. Then Derek broke the silence. "You think he's proud now?" I looked out at the winding Kentucky road, the same one we used to bike as kids. "I think he always was," I said. "He just didn't know how to show it. And I think you figured it out for both of you." He nodded slowly. We didn't say another word the rest of the drive. And for the first time ever, that silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. 20 years. That's how long I wore the uniform. From the skinny kid who everyone thought would wash out of basic, to a sergeant first class who trained the next generation of warriors. I'd seen more than I could explain. Lost good men. Earned scars I still carry. But I never lost who I was. I just finally grew into him. So when the time came to retire, I did it on my terms. Quietly. Without fanfare. At least that's what I thought would happen. I was just expecting a simple flag. My last day on base felt surreal. I cleaned out my locker, signed the final paperwork, and went to turn in my gear. The quartermaster patted me on the back and said, "Hard to believe you're leaving. Place won't be the same." I figured there'd be a small formation, maybe a handshake from the CO, maybe a folded flag and a few claps from the guys I mentored. What I didn't expect was Derek. He'd been planning something behind my back. As I stepped onto the field for my retirement send-off, I heard the sound of boots marching in rhythm. A full formation was assembled. Dozens of soldiers, lined up in sharp precision. And standing at the front, dressed in full officer's blues, was Lieutenant Derek Mercer, my brother. He stepped forward, holding a microphone. His voice came over the speakers, firm but thick with emotion. "Today we honor a soldier who didn't just serve the Army. He showed the Army what it means to serve. A leader who walked into fire, who led from the front, who taught me what courage really looks like." He turned toward me. "This man, my brother, is the reason I know how to lead." Then it happened. In front of the entire base, Derek dropped his salute. And then he did something no one expected. He stepped forward, dropped to one knee, and placed my retirement flag in my hands. Not a folded triangle from the command. Not a scripted handoff. This was personal. Real. "I mocked you when I didn't understand you," he said. "But now, I'd follow you into any fire." I felt my throat tighten. My hands shook around the flag, and for the first time in my life, I knew the scoreboard was settled. After the ceremony, the crowd dispersed. The sun began to set behind the hangars. I walked slowly to my truck, flag in hand, when Derek caught up. "You ready for civilian life?" he asked. I looked at the parking lot, at the sky, at the young soldiers who'd be taking the reins. "Yeah," I said, "but I'll always carry this with me." He smiled. "You'll still outrank me at every family BBQ." I laughed. Damn right. Back to civilian boots. These days, I teach leadership seminars for veterans transitioning into civilian life. No flashy titles, no medals on the wall, just stories. I tell them about convoy runs, heat exhaustion, tactical breakdowns, and how the worst battles happen in your own family sometimes. I tell them about the day my brother laughed at me, and the day he saluted me, and the day he knelt to honor everything he once denied. Blood doesn't guarantee respect. Actions do. It's not your last name that earns you a salute. It's what you stand for when no one's watching. Whether your family believes in you or not, keep walking. Because one day, even your harshest critic might stand up and clap. If you found value in this story, don't leave quietly. Like this video if you've ever been underestimated. Subscribe if you believe respect is earned, not inherited. Comment below. Have you ever proved someone wrong just by staying true to who you are? Because around here, we don't chase applause, we earn it. Let me know if you'd like a thumbnail prompt or a title variation next.